Hello, Dreamcatchers, and welcome to the Writer's Haven. I am your host, Helena, and I'm excited about having romantic suspense author Deliah Lawrence in studio today. A Maryland-based attorney, blogger, and author, her debut novel, Gotta Let It Go, won the 2011 finalist New Generation Indie Book Award in the Multicultural Fiction category. And her short stories have been featured in the Creatures, Crimes, and Creativity 2013 and 2014 anthologies. An active member of the Maryland Writers Association, Black Writers Guild of Maryland, Sisters in Crime, and Greater Baltimore Cultural Alliance, Dee is currently working on a sequel to her first book entitled Gotta Get It Back, which is scheduled for release in spring 2018. Let's give Dee a warm Dreamcatcher welcome. Welcome to the show, Dee.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well,
it's a pleasure.
The pleasure is all ours.
All right.
So, you are actually our first suspense thriller author, romantic suspense thriller. That category, could you talk a little bit about that categorization, that genre of suspense thriller, because there's so many different kinds.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the question is, it's romantic suspense. Folks say that it would fall under the romance category, and they're correct. The suspense part would fall under thriller, but when you fuse them together, it's its own category, so to speak, where the action isn't as high as a thriller, but you still have that romantic momentum going through the novel.
And when you started writing, was it your intention to write a romantic suspense, or did it kind of evolve that way?
It was a natural progression, simply because I love reading romantic romance novels, and I love thrillers. I'm an avid TV fan, and when I watch shows like Investigation Discovery or anything like Mr. and Mrs. Smith with Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt, it's kind of where I was heading, because those are the things that I love. So it was the fusing of the best of both worlds. So it was just a natural progression for me.
Okay, so what was the genesis for this book?
Okay, so Gotta Let It Go, as I said before, it's sparked from my love of those two things. And I was looking around, and I didn't really see a lot of that type of books here set in the DMV area. So I said, why not? And so I'm an attorney, like you said before, and I said, okay, what if the attorney is going through a divorce, and at the same time there is a murder of someone who's very close to her? What happens next? And then, she falls for the detective. And so that was where I thought it would be a good story to put right in Baltimore. So, so that's where that came from, my love of those two things.
Okay, so in your writing process, well, first of all, how long did it take to write?
Okay, so from start to finish with the idea and everything, I would say a good year, and then the work really started because you have to start editing. And so I would say another 6 months or so, and then for the actual publication, so I would say 2 years from start to finish.
Do you edit while you write, or do you write complete and then go back?
I'm always tempted to edit while I write, but I was always told that it's best to get the writing down, get the first draft done, because if you go back and edit, it's going to slow you down.
Right.
So I listened, and I actually wrote the book from start to finish, and then I went back and then start doing my editing and finding what I needed to add, take out, move around. So that was part of my process, to just go through and then come back.
So let's talk more about your process. It took a year for you to write it, and then you went back to edit. So cradle to grave, the whole thing took before you pushed it off to publishing. And I know you self-publishing. We're going to talk about that too.
Sure.
But the entire cradle to grave process took more than a year, like maybe well, tell me.
A year and a half.
Yeah, about a year and a half.
So once I got the idea of Gotta Let It Go, so here's how I typically work. I have an idea for a creative project. The first thing I do is to try to get a title. So then I would have like a legal pad, and then I'd just keep writing, writing, writing. Don't like this, don't like. Maybe I can move a couple words around just to get the title. Some people think it's odd because they think the title will probably change over time, but for me, I want to just nail it just right. I get the idea, I start brainstorming where the story is going to take place, the time frame, whether it's going to be over a 3-month period, a year, couple of weeks, and then who are my characters? You know, am I going to be writing in the first person or third person? Then once that's done, then I start writing out the outline, what I want to see from the very beginning, the middle of the novel, and the end. Now, for me, that has to be flexible. And the reason why I say that is because when I sit there in front of the computer and start typing away, characters have a tendency to just pop up and kind of like talk to you and sway the story into a whole new direction. So, you know, the flexibility is key for me in my outline. I'm not tied to it. Some folks, they live and breathe, they don't want to move and they're kind of rigid. For me, it has to be a fluid process. Now, I know that the gold standard, I call it, is to write at a certain time of day, be in a specific location, or write a number of words per day. That's the gold standard. However, for me, because my weeks are so crazy, I try to carve out time wherever I can. And if I do it on the weekend, you know, sometimes it bumps into other obligations I have, but I still try to get something done. In addition, my writer's critique group, I've been running one for 10 years. And when we meet once a month, the obligation from each of the members is to make sure we submit something at least a week prior to us meeting. So that's kind of like another prompt for me to kind of buckle down and get something in front of them for critique.
Okay, so it sounded as though that you use the computer and you're not doing longhand with your, and so that can be a challenge in not editing.
That's right. That's right. And
so I applaud your discipline.
I try. It's tough sometimes. I'm going to be very honest that you know, I'm tempted, you know, because if I let it cool for like a day or two, chapter 1, I will go back and read, but I won't edit. I just want to make sure that there is a flow from chapter 1 to chapter 2, and so on and so forth. So I write very linearly. It has to be just like that. So maybe it's because of my legal training.
I was just about to ask you that. There's another author, Lauren Francis Sharma, who was in the Haven in our first season, and she's also an attorney, and that was one of the things that we talked about, you know, how much of that legal training flows into the creative process or just in the process in general of writing. So, you know, we're as unique as as we are as people and authors, and there is no ironclad way of doing it.
It's whatever works for you.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever works for you. So who are some of the authors that are out there that you admire and you know, you could see your writing being along the lines of how they write?
Excellent question. And one answer, Eric Jerome Dickey.
Oh, okay.
And so with Eric, as readers know, he writes contemporary novels about African American life, but he also writes thrillers. A Wanted Woman, and then you have the Gideon series. And what I really love about that is the fact that he talks about assassins, ex-cons, hitmen, hit women. The ride or the thrill in that novel is so high that once you start reading, you're locked into 400 and, you know, however many pages, but he keeps you there, you know. And when you talk about creating a story that's taking you from like LA to the West Indies, to the UK, you know, and all over, it's very, the international feel of it, you know. So what my takeaway is from Eric is that when you look at the structure of how his book is, you know, I try to have characters that are flawed. Gideon is a flawed man in the Gideon series as an assassin, but at the same time, there's some humanity to him. You know, he still hurts as a man when he sees his ex-lover or what have you. And so I try to take away to make my characters be more believable. You know, they're characters that I create that people would love to hate sometimes. But at the same time, you know, you watch them, you watch the growth. And so at the, you know, the action that goes with it. And I think Eric Jerome, he does an excellent job. And so I think definitely I've heard where people would say, you know, hey, this kind of feels like Eric a little. I said, yeah, you know, but it doesn't have that high octane, like I said before, the difference between a suspense and a thriller. It's just like one notch down.
Eric is a great person to look at his
Oh,
work
absolutely.
and to, if you're as a suspense writer, to kind of look at that, as well as James Patterson
Yes, James is good.
and
Yep.
Pamela Samuels
Yep.
Young. Yeah. Okay, so tell me, in terms of your process, research.
Oh,
Talk a
that's
little bit about that.
research is very important. You know, that's one of the first things you want to do. Now, I am an attorney. I do civil litigation. And in my novel, you know, it's crime, and the best friend gets killed simply because she is a witness to a murder. And so it's very real, you know, the witness intimidation where they try to take you out literally. And so for the criminal side, I have a friend of mine who's a prosecutor in Baltimore. I also know police officers. So when I had any questions related to how the intricacies of the criminal system work, pick up the phone, give them a call, and they're right on board in providing me the answers that I needed. So the and everything else, you know, the romance part, you know, anybody could just fill that in. You know, the craziness, just the things that I would observe driving around Baltimore, and the places, you know, some of the places that I have in the novel, the hotels and stuff like that, I actually went to. So you really have to put yourself out there and experience some of these things in order to bring some authenticity
Right.
to the writing.
Right. Exactly. You definitely want to be honest
Yes.
in the writing, and
You want to put your
the
readers there.
credibility
Yep.
of your writing, because you may have someone that's a reader that has that background,
I have to
knows
be
that.
very careful because they will call you out,
Yes.
you know, and
And the last thing you need is a
yep.
review on Amazon.
No.
Somebody calling you out on Amazon. But speaking of that, so you mentioned the writers group.
Yes.
Talk to us about why that's important to be a part of a writers group.
Let me just back up even before then. As writers, it's a very solitary thing. And going, if you're starting on your journey, even though some of us may be natural writers, you have to hone your craft. And by that I mean take a class, and that's what I did. You know, how to structure and craft a novel in X amount of days. And so I met a group of wonderful ladies, and I said at the very last day of class, I stood up and I said, is there anyone who would be interested in taking this conversation further? And I said, here's my notebook. I said, if you're interested, put your name, phone number, and email address, and I'll reach out and touch. And I did. And these are the same folks 10 years ago that are still with me, you know. So that's a blessing in and of
Yeah,
itself that
it
we were
really is.
able to gel, you know. And we've become good friends throughout the years, doing things outside of the group. But it's very important to belong to a community because it gives you another creative outlet for someone as a sounding board to give you feedback, you know, and positive feedback is always good, you know, constructive feedback. And I can tell you that these ladies are rewrite in different genres, but their feedback is invaluable like you wouldn't believe. They've definitely helped to shape Gotta Let It Go. A couple of characters that I wanted as a walk-on, you know, you get into the book and you're out. They said, oh, we love him, you know, we want to see more. So I listen, you know, and then they become a great source, you know. So if there's any like a rush job or something like that, even before we meet, I could always pick up the phone or send them an email to say, hey guys, I need this. And it's so important to have that community to allow you to share your work, because you really can't do this in a vacuum.
Right, right. So let's talk a little bit about the business of publishing. Your first book, self-published, that came out in 2011, 2010.
Yes, so yes.
Okay, so how did you approach that process of self-publishing?
Okay, so it was easy for me, you know, because you have the traditional way of things. In other words, you wait forever unless you are really lucky to be in the right place at the right time. Opportunity, you know, meets you, and you're able to transition over into the traditional hemisphere, as I call it. For me, it was a quick decision. I said, okay, I wanted to retain creative control. And
Very
I,
important.
I know that it's a lot of work. I was willing to put the work in. And so I know that I wanted control over the cover. I wanted to control over when I would actually roll out my product. I knew that I had to do all the marketing. That's fine. But it was easy for me because I didn't want to go through, you know, you need someone to kind of vet you to the publishing house, and then you have to wait. And even if they say yes, you know, some of your creative control gets taken away from you, you know, because if you sign on the dotted line, you're pretty much theirs.
Right.
And if you needed to make any changes whatsoever to your book, it would take forever. You know, whereas self-publishing, I just make the change, upload, and we're done. So it's the waiting factor for me, and the fact that my creative control was mine, and that's why I went to the self-publishing way.
Okay, and you're doing on-demand printing or?
I go through Create Space.
Okay.
It's a very easy platform to use, and ebooks. Those you can write. You know, if you want to be an author, if you want to just do short stories or whatever, it's so easy for you to upload something as an ebook and you're done.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a very quick process, and I do like it. It's work, but I don't do all of that myself because, like I said, you know, we need as writers a team. You know, so I need an editor, someone to design the cover, I need a publicist. So it's everyone working together to produce the best product that I can produce.
Okay. Now, I'm not familiar with Creative Space. I don't know how many the dream catchers are. What services did they provide to you? In
Okay, so
putting
that's
it?
Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah, Create
Okay.
Space.
Okay.
So the only service that, you know, you just upload and you can have your books through paperback if you like, and ebooks, you know. So I have my books across various ebooks and Kindle, and I also have, as you have right there, the physical book, and there you go, and that's Create Space, you know. But
Very, very good cover, I might add.
thank you,
Love this
thank you,
cover.
thank you.
Okay. So in the marketing of your book, I know there are publicists, there are agents. When did you determine it was a good time to engage one or the other? And which did you decide to go
Okay.
with?
For an agent, that would be if I were trying to get into the traditional publishing of things.
And you
So
knew early on that you didn't want to
I
do
didn't
that?
want to do that. Yeah, I knew from the beginning. There is a lot of hoops. You know, you have to write, you know, prepare a package, you get an agent, and then they have to kind of like go through the process for you, see who would be interested. And it's just, I didn't want to be bothered with that entire process. Not that it's not the way for folks to go, but that was my choice.
And was it a choice made because of the time that you had to devote to it, or you just didn't want to engage in the nitty-gritty of that process?
So because my book came out so long ago, and I felt it was time for a fresh new cover, to just kind of get back out there, because I know the second book is like right on the heels. It was a perfect time for you know, a publicist to give it kind of like a shove out
Yeah.
there to say, hey readers, you know,
Extra
here,
shot.
yeah, you know, here's Deliah Lawrence, and you know, she has a book and a fresh new cover, and dive in.
Right.
You know, so it was very easy for me because having a publicist gives me the ability um, for her to showcase my work and to kind of like shop in the media so I can get the, you know, garner that readership, new readership, this kind of like new interest
Yeah.
in the book because it's been so long.
Okay. The writing community. So you mentioned your writers group, but you know, in terms of other published authors in the genre that you're writing in, how has that experience been for you?
Here's the thing. The best place to find other folks like myself, writers' conferences. So you can't beat that. When I first started out, I did the Harlem Book Festival where I met Wahida Clark and a lot of folks. And then I started to go to Creatures, Crimes, and Creativity or the Maryland Writers Association Writers Conference. There is the Eastern Shore. There's so many things around town locally that you can do. The Gaithersburg Book Festival. So there's no shortage of me to kind of like bump into other folks that write in the same genre like I do. So that's a community in and of itself by way of network.
Okay, okay. I'm going to drag you to the Thriller conference in New York.
I've been. Okay.
You've been.
Yes.
So how was that?
Yes, it's excellent.
Yeah.
It's excellent. All the Jeffrey Devers of the world. I know Jeffrey as
Especially
well.
for suspense.
Yes,
writing.
absolutely. And it's a great way to network. I mean, there are agents there
Yep.
who can not only for thrillers, you know,
Right.
it's for pretty much
Any
all
genre,
any
yeah,
genre whatsoever.
Yeah,
But
you
it's
can
an
get a
excellent-
book deal right there.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
I know you weren't looking
Yeah,
for one,
yeah,
but you know,
yeah,
hey.
yeah. So it's a great. I would definitely say go. You know, even if it's just for the day.
Okay, so with your book that's about to come out in
Yes.
spring, talk to us a little bit about that. And actually, before you go into it, when you finished your first book, did you know there was going to be a second? Did you feel that a sequel was in the works?
No.
Okay, okay.
You know, when I ended Gotta Let It Go, it could go either way. But my intention was never to write a second. Well, it's one of three now, a second and then a third.
Very nice.
It wasn't until readers were sending me emails and calling me, bumping into me at the gym and saying, you know, when is the second book coming out? When is the second book coming out? I'm like, okay, then I guess I should have a second. And then I thought, you know, hey, the story line is very strong. The protagonist, Deidre Hunter, is very strong, that you could really thread stories through her and just take her into different situations.
I easily saw it as a TV series.
Did you?
I really did.
Okay. Okay, tell me more.
Easy saw it as. I mean, like you said, I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many, because you have a strong protagonist,
Yep.
there's so many stories that you could weave into that character. So Shonda, if you're watching,
Yes, Shonda.
you might want to get in touch with her, get in touch with Dee. Okay, so what advice would you give to an aspiring writer who is writing in the genre that you've chosen?
Okay. Read, read, read.
So important.
Okay. It's so important. I tell
All
folks,
caps, underline,
underline,
italics.
bold,
All of that,
everything.
yeah.
Read in your genre as well as outside of your genre. And read not only for pleasure, but read for structure and see how, you know, the first line could pull you in or the first 10 pages will pull you in to the novel. And I would say, and I think I said before, take a class or two because you really have to hone your skills even if you are a natural writer. There's certain things that are inherent in the genre that, you know, readers expect certain things. You can't have a romantic suspense novel without a thrill or a murder, you know, so you have to know what, it's kind of like baking a cake. You have to have the right ingredients to do this. And so taking the class, belonging to a writing community, attending conferences, and just continue to get yourself out there. Do workshops, and share more than anything else.
And what about the writing ethic itself?
The writing
Ethic of, just as you're learning the craft, just writing, read, write,
right. It goes together.
Yeah,
It goes together. And you really, with every book that you put out, you should really try to bump up your game, so to speak, because I've had beta readers for the second book, and they tell me it's better than the first. And I was like, wow, so that was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So
I'm really excited about your next book.
I'm excited too. So Deidre is going to be in the midst of a murder. A judge, Baltimore City Circuit Court judge, is murdered, and so she's thrust into solving that murder. So that's the gist of
I
Gotta
was
Get
a
It
little
Back.
afraid for her at first, jumping in, trying to find out who that killer was.
But she's headstrong. You know how she is. She's very headstrong. So
Yeah, very strong character. Well, I wish you much success with
you.
both books.
Thank you.
Of course, we'll need to have you back in the Writers Haven so we can talk about it.
Anytime.
And Dreamcatchers, I hope you enjoyed my chat with author Deliah Lawrence. Connect with her on Facebook and Twitter at author D, that's D-E-E, Lawrence, to follow her projects and writer's journey. And join me next week when we will be on location at the 6th Annual Annapolis Film Festival. I will be interviewing award-winning veteran filmmaker Sam Pollard, best known for his work on Spike Lee's Bamboozled, Jungle Fever, When the Levees Broke, and the Oscar-nominated For Little Girls. He was there to showcase his newest film, I've Gotta Be Me, the Sammy Davis Jr. story, and Acorn and the Firestorm. I know you guys remember that story. Both great films and a great interview that you don't want to miss. We will also feature highlights of the festival, including a brief interview with filmmaker Joshua Marston, who recently completed the film Come Sunday that chronicles the real-life tale of embattled Bishop Carlton Pearson, who challenged the biblical belief that there is a hell. The film will air on Netflix on April 13th, so you don't want to miss our interview with Josh and the real-life Bishop Pearson. Also, don't forget you can catch us on our YouTube, Spreaker, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, and Alexa channels. And Dreamcatchers, if you figure out how the Alexa part works, shoot me an email, because I'm still trying to figure out how I'm getting that channel on Alexa. So just shoot me an email. So bottom line, there's no excuse for you to ever miss an episode. So we will see you next week, but until then, catch fire and focus.
This is the moment I knew. His future had no boundaries.
There are some moments only the forest can inspire. Find yours at discovertheforest.org.